Welcome to the Cook Group's podcast, What's Cooking in Litigation, with your host, Brian Wacker. In each episode, you'll meet industry leaders, innovators, and educators in litigation. We'll discuss the latest advancements, efficient practices, and strategic updates. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, cookgrouplegal.com. Now here's the host of What's Cooking in Litigation, Brian Wacker.
Hello, and welcome to What's Cooking in Litigation. I am your host, Brian Wacker. This is our first episode. Each week, we are going to be breaking down latest trends in litigation and chatting with what we think are some of the sharpest minds in the industry, including those within our firm, the Cook Group. We'll be getting to the heart of what's happening in litigation. There's not going to be a lot of jargon and fluff, more insight and substance, and we're going to try to have a little fun while we're at it. So let's jump in. This is our first episode, so appropriately, we've decided that we are going to bring on Kerryann Cook, the founding and managing partner of the Cook Group. Kerryann, welcome.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it.
This is the perfect medium I think you would appreciate for both of us. It gets our faces in front of everyone, and that's what everyone wants to see, right?
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Right. All right. So, Kerryann, let's talk briefly if we can. Can you just give us a brief kind of background of the firm? What your inspiration was with starting it?
I'll take maybe the second part first. So we've been very fortunate in the years of practice to be able to work with a group of people that sort of started to congeal together, some like-minded folks. And, really the Cook Group was born out of a shared interest in having a bit more autonomy to be able to provide a potentially better service and certainly, more efficient, cost-effective legal advice than maybe what some of us have experienced, both, as lawyers or, just being in the industry. So it's sort of born out of, like a lot of firms start as you think you can, if you were the ones doing it, you're going to do it better. But I felt really confident with the group that we had, everyone had been litigating for a number of years and we had a good blend of folks and just, frankly, you spend a lot of your life, working. So it was a really nice way to decide to work with people you really liked by choice. So that's sort of what was born of. And now we've grown. We had our 5-year anniversary party, which because you were at last week. But we started in January of 2020, just before the pandemic, because we obviously knew that was happening. And then now 5 years later, we're about twice in size. We have twice as many offices and just recently expanded to California. So although we sort of started defending asbestos cases as the bulk of our work, certainly, as you know, Brian, we've expanded. Now we're, involved in lots of things, but mostly litigation, with an ear towards trying to be a more robust, well-rounded, general liability firm. But certainly the original, premises was defending asbestos cases and mass tort litigation. And then we've been able to grow by bringing on folks like yourself and a few other people, but that's sort of the genesis of it. We were all together for a number of years at another firm and decided to give it a go. And perhaps the worst timing in the history of starting law firms, a few weeks before the pandemic.
Let me ask you about that. I timed my entry into the firm, I think, perfectly because I joined in 2022, right after sort of the depths of the pandemic. But can you tell us a little bit about the challenges and kind of how the firm sort of overcame those and has gotten to the point where we are today?
Yeah, we joke about sort of being, shot out of a cannon is what it felt like, and I think whether you planned or didn't plan to leave or planned or didn't plan to start something, no matter what you thought, it was never, there's always more to it than what we had. So we were very, very fortunate to begin very early on with a great IT consulting firm. And we were, up and running within, a couple of weeks in the cloud, which I thought was a huge advantage for us. Just in terms of what we were doing whenever the whole world stopped and people were working from home, because, maybe for folks that are listening, didn't realize, I'm sitting here in downtown, Manhattan, which was essentially, unfortunately, ground zero again for this. So everything was shut down and we didn't have access to anything. So it was great. Silver lining of all that is, starting out in the cloud completely mobile and up to speed. We didn't miss a beat in terms of, the defense of our clients and being able to dig in and make sure that we were, on top of everything. So the pandemic was a huge challenge, getting started from a technology standpoint. And I thought, honestly, we had a great advantage. And then, what's been born of that is a really cool IT platform that's been custom made for us, but maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I think, a lot of our clients, especially because we do a lot of insurance defense based work, being able to have the flexibility that we did at the beginning of the pandemic, when everyone was scrambling to figure out how to cover things remotely or, submit invoices or discovery or whatever it was online. We were fortunate to start out, clean, if you will, from a perspective. So.
Yeah, I think that dovetails pretty well into a couple of things I wanted to hit today was, we as you and I know, law firms like to have slogans and we like to market ourselves. And I think a lot of that kind of gets lost because every time you go on a law firm's website, there's a lot of the same sort of seemingly AI generated pablum that tells everybody that we're great and, better than everyone else out there. But we do have a slogan here that I think actually kind of speaks more to the firm's core values than just marketing, and that's modern, effective, and efficient. And I think you talked about Cookbook. Can you kind of talk a little bit about how it is we're able to serve our clients, or what it is that, frankly and substantively sets us apart from other folks in the industries that we serve?
Certainly. I think, one thing that's, a basic tenet of what we do that covers both the modern, efficient, and effective part is we're reasonable people, and I understand the assignment, if you will. We're retained to be zealous advocates of our clients. So, we're realistic in that we provide practical solutions. We're realistic in that we provide options. As people have heard me say a million times before, we could Sherman march to Atlanta on anybody if you'd like us to, but that might not be what you want us to do. So I like to provide as much options as we can so that we're effective, but in the most efficient way for a client's dollar. And I think that, to go back to the first word, is a fairly modern approach. I think a lot of defense counsel, at least in my experience, is these are all the things that we can do, right? And I'm was born of a philosophy of there's what you can do, what you should do, and what happens. And we should prepare our clients for all of those along the way. But doing mass torts, at the core of what, where the firm started, if you can't pick up on the efficiencies of it, you could be overwhelmed by it. And then the cost of the litigation provides your client no other outcome other than to try to stop the bleeding of the cost. So, the efficiency nature of it provides that the majority of the spend, if you will, is on substantive things to defend the actual client and not the things that you could do. Certainly we do the things we should be doing. But we like to look at things with an open mind to say, if we could map out all these different courses, what may be in the bigger long-term interests in cyclic litigation and mass tort litigation, things like that. So efficiency speaks to my soul. I have a hard time getting through a conversation with folks that, that aren't necessarily efficient, but I think it's a huge cost savings to our client, by way of, just cost savings, but also the clarity that it provides about where we may go. Because, after you sit through 10,000 cases, 20,000 cases, you start to see, certain trends and areas in which, there might be savings to be had or things that maybe aren't as important in other regular litigation. So that's really where it's come from. The modern part was, to tell a bad story, I had a friend at the time that just said, if you take one more picture, one more headshot in front of a shelf of law books, right? And I was like, point taken, we won't do that.
Well, now all of those pictures are all generated in the background anyway.
Correct.
We don't even have the books.
Yeah, but the whole point is, we're dynamic. We're not stuffy and sort of set in our ways, and certainly haven't been around for at the same firm for 20, 30, 50 years. So we want to be able to project that too. Certainly not light on experience, but certainly looking at the practice of the law, outside of being zealous advocates as a business as well.
Right.
Or at least not ignoring the business implications of litigation, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's, I think that's a good point, is that, you talked about sort of born out of asbestos and toxic tort litigation. You can probably see from my hairline, I think I'm old enough to remember that I've been told every year that I'm an attorney that toxic tort and asbestos litigation is on the way out and it's going away. And I think for the 15 years I've been in practice, that the opposite has been true. So obviously that modern and sort of efficient way that's something that the clients are sort of asking for at this point, right?
Right. Yeah. In a ripe litigation like asbestos, you don't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel, but the wheels come a long way. Let's say that. So you want to make sure that, you're able to do that, but there's no value to your client in reinventing the wheel, right? What you're trying to do is figure out what wheel are we looking at here, which way to get to the end and frankly, the safest, most less of a footprint in the litigation as possible at times. So, that's something that certainly was, we kept in mind when trying to set up our practice.
So do you see that as, and I know it's may not be apples and oranges, but maybe Washington apples and Johnson apples, but do you see that as a blueprint for sort of emerging areas of toxic tort litigation, whether it's talc or PFAS, which I'm not sure anybody even knows what that is yet, but it's sort of a blueprint for that, knowing that that's where the plaintiff's bar is going to be headed at some point?
I think any mass tort would be a great blueprint for, if we're going to talk, or we have talked already about AI. We've been, AI since day one. If you're trying to find predictive outcomes or try to find inefficiencies in a system, we're set up to do that. So, that going back to the modern part of it, the practice of law has changed, right? Any technology, that's advanced, those costs should be shared by, in terms of the cost savings should be passed on to clients. So we're always looking for ways in mass torts. I forget the numbers, and I should have, maybe had them a little closer to hand, but I think we touched over 45,000 different cases last year, across the country. So if you're not set up to be efficient when you're trying to manage, 45, 50,000 cases, at a time, I think you're doing your client a big disservice.
Right. Well, you talked about around the country. We just added a California office. Very exciting news for us. But, I think if someone looked at our law firm's website or kind of did a little digging on us, they'd notice that we're in a lot of jurisdictions that share a lot of same characteristics. Can you talk about that a bit?
Sure. The firm being, sort of born originally, out of the asbestos practice, we've been very fortunate to represent a lot of clients on the national level. So we wanted to make sure that we had boots on the ground, in person, people who are, sort of in the courthouses every day, like I am here, in each of the high volume jurisdictions. So for asbestos, that's necessarily New York City. You all sitting in St. Louis, because Madison County is across the river, and in Chicago. And then that's the highest filing of jurisdiction for asbestos cases in the country. And then, the other places we have offices, I'd put into the where the scary cases are filed list. Sure. Like California is a difficult place to litigate. The verdicts are very high. Same for Florida. We have offices in both of those places. Then, of course, I'd be remiss to forget Philadelphia, where we also have a nice presence, Right. So we very intentionally have offices in places in which litigation is difficult. They're traditionally on the hellhole lists, and, most people in the defense side would say are the most difficult jurisdictions to litigate in. So that's where we wanted to be. We want to be on the tip of the sword. We want to be the ones in the courthouse that are not just reporting the news, but trying to make it and make a difference. So we are in high volume, high risk jurisdictions by choice.
And so having that sort of national practice, but also the localized practice as well in those specific jurisdictions, that does sort of provide, again, kind of going back to it, that efficiency that we were talking about earlier, right?
Yep, that's exactly right.
Yeah. So near and dear to my heart, the firm is expanding a bit. I've been with the firm now for 3 years, and there's a few more of us that have come along trying to expand a bit more into general litigation. Can you talk a little bit about that, where we're seeing a little bit of movement on that, and what the plans are for the future of that?
Yeah, certainly. I think we've seen a big growth in employment law. I think we've seen a big growth in other toxic torts that are not necessarily asbestos or talc. That could be lead, mold, underground storage tanks. We've taken on some cases having to do with PFAS, but really anything from a mass tort perspective, where we've been involved in litigation, maybe outside of Camp Lejeune, at this point, because that's right. You could guess which the defendant is in that case. But, outside of that, anything litigating toxic torts, but then, well, in the more general sphere, certainly employment, regular contract disputes, regular, products liability type things, exploding cans, crane falls, things like that. There are all certainly things that we've done or in those growing areas. But really, anything that's real serious, heavy litigation with a lot of risk seems to be what we've been able to tackle. And because of it, been able to generate additional and new work because of the results that we've been able to achieve.
Right. And I think, speaking on my own, and, I'm not sort of feeding you the answer here, but it seems to me that the blueprint in substantial and effective defense of clients on a larger scale is sort of the willingness to kind of get your fingernails dirty, get into the case, not be so concerned about what it's gonna cost or take to get there, but to do a good substantial job for your client, because that's where you get the good results and that's where more work comes from.
Yeah, I mean, our job is to map it out. Litigation happens for a reason because people disagree about what happened, right? So our job is to find out what happened and map it out with all the options, and be as upfront about that as we can be. Our job is not to see how long we can make the case last, right? Our job is to get the best result for our clients, and in my opinion, as soon as you could do that.
Yeah, client focused and objective driven, right?
Absolutely.
Let me ask you, we got a few minutes left. Let me ask you a little bit about yourself.
Sure.
I know that's your favorite thing to talk about yeah, right. What is it? You've been doing this, you've been incredibly successful at several firms, and you've got your name on the wall, and you're the hardest working person here at the firm. I know that from experience, and you throw a great party. What keeps you passionate about the work? What keeps you going and keeps the motor running at the level that you've got it?
Sure. I would say, I mean, it doesn't, maybe not the most sophisticated answer, but I don't know any other way to be. I either know to move forward. I always wanted to be better, as you guys know from listening to me at various partner meetings. Like good is fine, but great is better. And there's always room for improvement and always room to move forward. So I think it's just an unquenching internal need to move forward and progress. That drives me, career-wise. But that is born by, wanting to be able to provide for my family and my son, and my partner, and in making sure that, we, they don't necessarily, have to struggle for anything. We're not really at a point where we're not, we're not wanting anything, but, it's just, with my background and stuff, I didn't inherit this law firm by any means. So I'm driven by the absolute ability to stay, here and focused, and, a lot of that, hopefully we're moving past it. But when you start a law firm in the pandemic, you really understand the word survival.
Yeah.
Of trying to keep, everybody employed, trying to keep everybody here and safe. And I'm really, really proud of the fact that we were able to get through the whole pandemic at the time that we started, and we never laid anybody off. Nobody ever lost a paycheck. And we were able to navigate that for our folks. That's super important to me. So, outside of my desire, to keep moving forward, that my unquenchable, need to progress, I really care about the folks we work with and their families. And I realize that, this isn't just some place where people work. If something happens here, people don't have, some folks don't have jobs, and it's, it could be really devastating, not just to my family, but to others. So I'm driven every day to keep it going, to try to make it the best I possibly can for every single person that works here.
Yeah. So the firm is 5 years old. You said earlier, we've only been, as a firm for 5 years, but one of the things I think is really strong about the firm that I think maybe people don't necessarily get from on a superficial level is, despite the relative youth of the firm, each of our offices have pretty substantial continuity coming from different firms together, right? So your New York office, for example,
right.
The core there, those are folks you've been working for a number of years, beyond just the 5 years, right?
Yeah, I mean, even using pandemic math, which the core,
I don't know which way that goes.
Yeah, everything was either 2 years ago or before the pandemic.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, I would say that the core group is certainly the founders. We've been together almost 15 years. Some of the paralegals and I have been together for longer than that. But most of the partners that are here in New York are all been, working together as a group for 8-10 years. And it's been great. Like I said at the beginning, it's like a really nice way we have to work for a living, but it's a really nice way to go through life with people that you you really enjoy and you care for and you respect. And I think it's that mutual respect for each other that's been able to drive us forward.
Yeah. And I think on a personal level, I think on the, with respect to our different offices, while we've sort of cobbled back together at different points, you've got continuity in our Chicago office, continuity down here in St. Louis. And again, I think it just makes for a better work product and a better client-driven experience when you have folks who want to work together, right? We're all here because we want to be here.
I think one interesting sort of through line is the groups that we've acquired since we've started. We share the same values, right? They were also looking for autonomy to be the people they've become in their careers, right? To be trusted, to be the folks that are running, the defenses and the trials and the various accounts. And they wanted to be able to do that, without a foot on their neck at all times. So to me, and everyone who's ever interviewed here knows this, that I've said, my philosophy is everybody starts with an A. You're here because we're interested and you're qualified and you have a great reputation. So, we don't need to have that sort of, we have lots of oversight, but, we really do encourage folks to have autonomy, to be the talented folks that they are.
Yep. All right. So one last question. I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Great.
Aside from, us recording episode 1,000 of this podcast, where are you looking to see the firm in 5 years?
In 5 years?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if we could be twice as big as we are today, I think that would be incredible. I don't know how likely that would be because that's an unbelievable trajectory. But again, at a basic level, I hope everyone's here, healthy and happy, and that we're still providing, great legal services for very good value. Well, people understand that we're driven, by those things. Yeah. So if we're able to still be doing that, and people still have the mutual respect and they're happy and healthy, I don't know what else you could ask for.
Yeah. And I happen to be of the mind that, it's sort of a new age with AI and all these things, but people are still going to be getting in fights. People are still going to be litigating and the work's going to be there. And
somebody's got to create the conflict to litigate, right?
So I have no doubt that the plaintiff's bar still wants to eat dinner at night. So I think that they're going to keep filing suits and we're going to be around to defend them. Well,
yeah, I do think it seems to be one of the areas of law that has been the least affected by change, but also I think has the most room to move forward technologically.
I think that's exactly right. And I think we're on the cutting edge of being able to do that.
I agree.
That's a great way to sort of conclude this because we're going to be talking. You won't be on all of our episodes, obviously. You're making me do all this work for non-billable time, but right. We're going to be having episodes going forward this year, talking more about the firm, more about our what we provide, but also we're going to talk to some other folks outside the firm, clients, industry leaders. We're really hoping everybody, after getting to know us a little bit on this episode, is able to say, you know what, this is something 20 minutes a week, every other week that they can tune in for. We're going to have some interesting stuff. We've got some trends, new developments, especially here in Missouri and Illinois, where things are getting a lot closer to New York and California than we had ever thought they were going to be. And so we're hoping everybody continues to tune in, and maybe at the end of this season, so to speak, Kerryann, we can touch back and check in, see if I still have an A in your book for doing this podcast.
Sounds like a great plan. I really appreciate it. I think you're doing a great job. And I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of these podcasts. So I do appreciate it, Brian.
I've always been told I have a radio face, so we'll see how this goes. All right. Well, that's going to do it for our episode 1. We will have a new episode probably every 2 or 3 weeks. So if you've liked what you've seen, please click on the RSS button, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. This will be on our YouTube channel. We'll ask you to subscribe to that as well. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks
Sounds
again,
good.
Kerryann.
Thank you.
All right.
You've been tuning in to the Cook Group's podcast, What's Cookin' in Litigation, with your host, Brian Wacker. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, cookgrouplegal.com. Thank you for sharing this show with others.